Pro-Russian, anti-American parties are expected to win a quarter of the votes, if not more, in Germany's upcoming elections. The far-right Alternative for Germany and the left-wing conservative Sahra Wagenknecht Alliance want Germany to drop sanctions on Russia and start importing Russian gas again. The success of these parties that are sceptical about the US and NATO could present a major challenge to the transatlantic relationship, particularly on security and trade. DW's Matthew Moore reports.
Election time in Germany, where anti-American sentiment
Army, go home! Es ist Zeit!
and pro-Russian views are rife.
Das ist eine Aufgabe von Herrn Zelensky, da auch endlich mit den Morden aufzuhören. Er schickt die Leute in den Tod.
25% of voters support two parties seeking a big shift in Germany's relationships with the USA and Russia. What's behind these attitudes? And what impact could they have on Germany's political future? First, a recap. For decades, Germany was divided. West Germany, democratic and capitalist, backed by the United States. East Germany, communist and authoritarian, backed by Soviet Russia. From Truman to Reagan, Stalin to Gorbachev. In the West, anti-Americanism was largely reserved for left-wing peace movements. In the East, anti-Americanism was embedded in the ethos of the ruling elite. In 1989, the Iron Curtain fell. The two Germanys were united a year later, and the former East Germany became a NATO member, joining the former West Germany. Today, America's footprint remains substantial. There are 7 US military bases and 50,000 troops stationed in the former West. And if anything, anti-Americanism is very much back.
Diese Vasallentreue gegenüber der USA, die muss endlich ein Ende finden in der deutschen Politik.
It's the meeting of the Sahra Wagenknecht Alliance, or BSW, a populist movement founded by a former communist. They want Germany to drop sanctions on Moscow and begin buying cheap Russian gas again.
Die Sanktionen haben nichts mit Moral, sie haben nichts mit Menschenrechten, sie haben nichts mit Friedensliebe zu tun. Sie sind schlicht ein Konjunkturprogramm für die US-Wirtschaft und ein Killerprogramm für deutsche und europäische Unternehmen.
It's a sentiment widely shared here, underpinned by a deep suspicion of the US and NATO.
Wir sind im Grunde eine Art Lakaien des amerikanischen Systems. Ne?
Wir wollen keine schlechten Beziehungen zu den Vereinigten Staaten, wir wollen aber natürlich unabhängig sein und unsere eigenen Interessen vertreten.
I think Germany should, be self-conscious to say we want our own positions to be heard, even if this causes a certain uproar in the US.
Everyone we've just heard from is in the BSW party, a movement that has its roots in the left. But in today's Germany, this scepticism towards the US has emerged on the other end of the political spectrum too, on the far right. The Alternative for Germany, or AfD, party conference. Like the BSW, the AfD rejects what it sees as US hegemony. The party wants to move toward a, quote, interest-driven relationship with the major powers of the world, like the US, China and Russia.
Was wir nicht möchten, ist, dass wir zum Spielball fremder Interessen werden. Und da wollen wir unseren eigenen Weg eben auch finden.
For the AfD, that means the withdrawal of US troops from Germany and a resetting of the relationship.
Frau Weidel hat gesagt, dass Sklaven nicht kämpfen. Da muss man sich halt entscheiden in den USA, was man haben möchte. Möchte man auf Augenhöhe mit einem befreundeten Land zusammenarbeiten oder möchte man in Lehnsherrenmanie seinen Vasallen sagen, was sie zu tun haben? Das ist dann eine Sache, wie man damit souverän umgeht.
Some in the party see the election of Donald Trump with his nationalist agenda as an opportunity. And the endorsement by Elon Musk embodies this new dynamic, allowing the AfD to present itself as a bridge between Russia and the US.
Unsere geliebte Partei, unser geliebtes Projekt für Deutschland, die einzige Partei ist, die alle Gesprächskanäle offen hat, in den Osten und in den Westen.
Others expect a clash when America first meets Germany first. Björn Höcke is the most influential ideological figure in the party and a lodestar for the nationalist wing.
Wir müssen davon ausgehen, dass Donald Trump auch eine harte Reindustrialisierungspolitik in den USA durchführen wird. Ja? Und das wird sicherlich auch zu Konflikten mit deutschen und europäischen Interessen führen.
One such conflict could be energy. The AfD also wants to import gas from Russia again through the Nord Stream pipeline, presumably instead of the more expensive LNG Germany currently buys from the USA.
Ich bin der Meinung, dass eine bedingungsloses auf Seiten der USA stellen, ohne die deutschen Interessen im Blick zu haben, falsch ist. Und wenn ich mir das anschaue, was mit den Sanktionsmaßnahmen passiert ist, die sind uns von den USA vorgegeben worden. Deutschland hat darunter zu leiden gehabt.
You hear this a lot, on the right and on the left, that Germany was somehow forced into sanctions by the US. But that overlooks the fact that all G7 member states backed these sanctions on their own merits, seeing them as essential to punishing Russia for its invasion. The AfD wants to turn its back on that and scrap the ban on Russian imports, and has been critical of Germany's military support for Ukraine while parroting Putin's version of events.
Es wurde ganz bewusst im Hinterhof Russlands gezündet. Und wenn Sie sehen, was bei der Kuba-Krise passiert ist, wie die USA darauf 1962 reagiert haben, da muss man sich wirklich fragen, es soll jetzt nicht den Krieg rechtfertigen, aber es ist nicht so monokausal, wie das gerne dargestellt wird.
Russian talking points are commonplace here, blaming everything on America. Look, neither of these two parties, the AfD or the BSW, can really get into power in the upcoming elections, but that doesn't mean they have no influence. The BSW is in governing coalitions in 2 states, and together these parties can really shape the debate. And that's especially true in the former East Germany. Decades of communist rule still cast a shadow here. Chancellor Olaf Scholz of the centre-left Social Democrats is here to talk to voters. He's trying to project a balance between supporting Ukraine while not being seen as escalating the conflict. That caution, a nod to history, fear and public opinion. Support for Ukraine, how do you see that?
Da möchte ich keine Auskunft dazu geben.
Wenn man das hört, was der Trump alles so vorhat und der Putin schon veranstaltet, wird es einem ja Himmelangst.
Früher war der Putin unser Freund, ne? Und jetzt ist er auf einmal Feind. Und damit müssen die Leute erst mal zurechtkommen. Das ist schwierig zu erkennen.
Auf der einen Seite, klar, Krieg möchte niemand und dass auch dann Menschen darunter leiden müssen, ist natürlich total tragisch, aber es ist halt trotzdem schwierig, dann zu sagen, dass vielleicht auch Diplomatie in Frage kommen würde.
Scholz has asked about the stationing of US medium-range missiles in Germany, particularly controversial in this region.
Und was wir aus dem aktuellen Krieg lernen, dass es nicht nur hilfreich ist, dass man sich verteidigen kann, das, was da alles auf einen einwirkt, sondern dass man jemanden, der einen bedroht, auch sagen kann, ich kann auch auf dich einwirken.
Scholz is trailing in the polls and is unlikely to be the next chancellor. His challenger is Friedrich Merz of the centre-right Christian Democrats. He too faces pressure in the east from those who want better relations with Russia, right up to his state premier in Saxony, who wants to stop sending weapons to Ukraine. Merz insists he's committed to helping Ukraine to victory.
We are in a very critical phase. We don't know yet what the American government will do. And I will tell him the same when I will meet him tonight, as I did shortly before Christmas, that he can rely on us.
Merz is likely to be the next chancellor. He's firmly of the pro-American tradition. Part of his challenge will be trying to reconcile Germany's political fringes, who so deeply disagree.
Let's bring in German-British historian, journalist and author Katja Heuer. Her latest book is Beyond the Wall, a history of East Germany between 1949 and 1990. Welcome, Katja. Thanks so much for your time today. Why is support for parties with an anti-American stance, so we're talking about the AfD and the BSW here, why are they stronger in the former East Germany?
Well, I think part of it has got historical roots. So there is, a legacy of anti-Americanism, I think, in the East due to the history that it's had. So with it being part of the Eastern Bloc during the Cold War, and looking very much east towards the Soviet Union and Russia rather than west towards the United States. I think a legacy of that has sustained itself to that day when you kind of grow up with that image in your mind of what the world looks like and how it operates, particularly with NATO as an enemy. I think some of that sticks. But I think there's also a tendency today, that you see in other European countries as well, where the right particularly aligns itself with Russia rather than with America. And that is also, there's an element of anti-wokeism, if you will, in that. So the sense that, the West stands for liberalism and for left-leaning politics, and Putin stands for the opposite. So I think both of these play a role.
Germany's, of course, going to the polls next month. And in this election, this feeling of anti-Americanism has been exacerbated by the Russia-Ukraine war. So, I mean, this is a war we're talking about. Why is there so much sympathy for Russia's motives in the former communist East Germany? Is that related to what you've just told us?
I think it is, in the sense that you can weave that into the same narrative. So if you view the world from that angle, you see basically Russia as someone, or as a country that responds to American and Western aggression in the region. So the argument there is that NATO has been expanding eastwards, that this made Russia feel insecure, and that it's basically fighting or pushing back. So quite often the Cuban Missile Crisis is used as a sort of historical counterpoint. Now, obviously, I don't agree with that logic, and many people would find very good arguments against that. But if you want to believe that basically Russia is just defending its own interests there, there's an argument to be had there, and that's what a lot of people buy into.
Let's talk about Donald Trump for a moment. Do you think that Trump's American first stance is likely to fuel this sense of anti-Americanism in Germany?
Well, I think that's an interesting question, because in many ways it should, because obviously when, we're selling as Germany, I mean, is selling a lot of stuff to the US. And so an America first stance would, of course, harm German economic interests. But on the flip side, many people in that spectrum also see what Donald Trump's doing in the US as a role model for what Germany could do with a new government, basically, under the AfD. So I think there's an ambivalence there. I think that even the AfD itself hasn't quite worked out what to do with yet. So there's the support for what Trump's doing, but at the same time, that's deep skepticism towards the US still plays a role.
If we think about how long Germany has been unified, I mean, if tolerance of Russia in the eastern part of Germany is to an extent a legacy of communist rule, as you were suggesting, I mean, is there then any sign that it might be dying out? Because East and West Germany were reunited almost 25 years ago.
I think maybe in terms of the historical roots, but at the same... Yeah, maybe in terms of the historical roots, but at the same time, the sort of worldview that comes with that, and the sort of looking east is also embedded in some of the stuff that's been going on since 1990. So if you take the economic consequences, say, of the sanctions against Russia, they were very, very deeply felt in the east, because the pipelines arrive in eastern Germany, the gas and oil pipelines that were switched off. So that has affected a lot of people. The very close economic ties that were there, a lot of them were actually from companies that had bases in the east, with Russia as well. So those sorts of things will still play a role, as will the legacy of what, parents and grandparents teach their children and how they grow up. So I think that there will be an element of that will carry into future generations as well.
Looking at the bigger picture, do you also think that this could be a sign of a search for a unified German identity in a way?
I think there are some elements of that are actually unifying. I mean, you see a similar kind of anti-Americanism in the West within the left-wing spectrum there. So, this idea that America is the ultimate Western capitalist sort of state is there amongst elements there as well. So I don't think in and of itself this is something that will divide Germans or kind of perpetuate the divide between East and West. because there's been commonality there. And I think we also see that in the rise of the AfD across Germany. Yes, it has a stronger base in the east, but it's growing in support across all of Germany as well at the same time. So I think there are some elements there that aren't necessarily just in the east, and therefore not necessarily in the way of German reunification, if you will, in terms of society and culture.
We'll have to leave it there. Katja Hoyer, historian, journalist and author. Thanks so much, Katja, for joining us.
Thank you.